I was reading today's gospel text with our Bible study this past Wednesday when something struck me. It's in the opening 2 verses. Let's revisit. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" Did you hear that? Jesus asked, "Who made me the judge here?" And I would think that the answer to that is, well, you did, Jesus. That's kind of what you do. In John's Gospel, the evangelist writes Jesus saying, "For judgment I have come into the world." Let's remember the words of the Apostles' Creed. On the 3rd day he rose again. He ascended into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come to judge the living and the dead. Judgment, I feel, is kind of universally seen as part of Jesus' gig. So here's the question. Is there a tension between Jesus' judgment gig and this holy house and all who offer here their thanks and praise being promoted as a judgment-free zone? I mean, if judgment is really that big of a part of the pie. Well, Pastor, I can hear some people saying, we're not the one judging. Judging is what Jesus does, though we kind of know, you know what I mean? So let's take a step back. I frequent a gym here in Whitehall. From the intersection of Hamilton and Main Streets, if you are facing any direction but south, you can see, written on the side of the building, the phrase, judgment-free zone. The idea being that you will not be judged for any reason if you are there, if you go frequently or infrequently, if you lift a lot of weight or a little weight, if you are a beginner or are very experienced. Regardless, it is a judgment-free zone. Inside the gym, there are signs that read, "No gym-timidation," a clever way of saying no intimidation in the gym. Come as you are. We want this to be a safe place where you are not scared to be you. No gym-timidation. No pressure for you to fall in line with rules or culture that you may not even know exist. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at these signs and thought to myself, I wonder if we can rip all this off. I wonder if we can rip off their advertisements. They are really knocking out of the park a lot of sentiments that the church has been talking to itself about for decades. And they're doing it simply, directly, and efficiently. Though it hit me when I was there the other day that this idea of judgment-free zone truly only extends so far. Because also there is a funny sign that says "Lunk Alarm" with a blue alarm light underneath it, like an actual alarm light. And below that light, it reads "Lunk," noun, slang, one who grunts, drops weights, or judges. On a practical level, I get it. Everything breaks down somewhere, and that phrase, "no judgment," will always have some boundaries. So, in this case, no judgment unless you're a lunk, and then all bets are off. But again, could we in the church do something similar to this? Get banners that say judgment-free zone, and maybe little signs that say no sin-timidation. All are welcome. Would Jesus then be the one to call people a lunk or not? But again, hold that thought. And just for a moment, let's consider how we think about judgment. I believe that most people, when asked about the idea of judgment, would implicitly assume a degree of surprise with it. Consider how our legal system works. You go into court, you make your case, you wait for the verdict, then the judge decides. You go into the gym. Maybe you're a lunk, maybe you're not. We'll find out if the blue light goes off. We get to the pearly gates. St. Peter is going to look at an account of our lives, and we're going to sweat a little bit, which, if I'm dead and sweating, I know I'm not in heaven, just as an aside, but we wait for a verdict to be rendered. Jesus comes back. Surprise! And we hope we don't get caught with our hand in the cookie jar. I had a friend in childhood, when us boys would get into trouble, his mom would say to us, "Is that really what you want to be caught doing when Jesus comes back?" like being caught throwing eggs at a passing train would be the one thing that would cause the heavenly accounting of our deeds to truly go belly up. So consider this. Maybe our basic assumptions of judgment are not accurate for our interactions with Jesus. All fall short of the glory of God. No one is perfect. Sin comes from an old archery term meaning to miss the mark, which we all do. As worship begins, we recite the words together. We confess that we are captive to sin and cannot free ourselves. We have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, by what we have done and by what we have left undone. So we judge ourselves, and we find ourselves captive to sin and lacking. There is therefore no surprise, as we are guilty by our own admission. We therefore are undeserving and unfit for the kingdom of heaven by our own merit. But then I hear Jesus say, "Friend, who sent me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" An arbitrator is an independent person or body officially appointed to settle a dispute. I don't believe that Jesus' overarching task is to settle our simple disputes. Jesus came to love the world, all of it. Jesus came to save the world, all of it. Jesus came into a world that was already holding itself accountable in culture and by the Ten Commandments and found itself wanting. Jesus came into a world in which people could look around at how they treated themselves, each other, their neighbors, the people in their villages, the people in other villages, the people that they disagreed with, and they could see that something was lacking, that the mark was being missed. So Jesus comes into that world, into our world, and judges us to be still lovable. Jesus comes and releases the verdict that we are still a creation that is loved by the Creator. Jesus is surprising us with the fact that despite ourselves, despite our worst intentions, our worst motives, that God still loves us and that death cannot separate us from the love of God. Have you ever considered that? That in your worst moment, you are still a person that Jesus crushed hell underfoot to sanctify and to redeem. No matter how dark your darkest secret is, you are a person that Jesus sees, knows, loves, and deems redeemable. I feel like this is where we get our signals a little crossed. People much rather talk about how people are judged so we can separate ourselves from them, when I think that the judgment we should proclaim, the gospel judgment, is that God looks at creation, each and every one of us, and judges us to be loved children, worthy of grace, love, salvation, and redemption. All of us, even the lunks. Amen.